Good morning, Amy. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the podcast. Today we have a special guest, Yoni Anijar, attorney, captain judge advocate, running for District 100 in Broward, all the way from Fort Lauderdale to Deerfield. Yoni, welcome to the show, my friend.
Thank you for having me, man. I appreciate it.
Really excited, man. There's so much that to talk about here. First of all, you're running for District 100. Tell me the size of that district, population. Sure. Why are you running for this district?
Yeah, so District 100 covers from Fort Lauderdale, Pompano, up to Lighthouse Point, and part of Deerfield Beach. So part of the reason I'm running is it's the only district in all of Broward County. There's 11 districts in Broward. There's one Republican district, okay? I was born and raised in Broward. I've been here my entire life. I'm getting married next month.
Congratulations.
Yeah, appreciate it. So, look, I have a vested interest in making sure that the one Republican seat remains in Republican control so we can continue on the progress that Governor DeSantis has made, the incumbent that's in the race has made, and keep Florida, kind of solidify its position as the free state of Florida. And look, whether you live in Pompano or you live in Davie or Hollywood outside of my district, if you need a Republican, a sympathetic ears further a Republican cause or a Republican mission, you're going to go to this person that's in the seat, right? Because that's your only really representation. And you think about it, we were talking about it before. Broward's the second largest county in Florida, and it's a sea of blue. All my buddies always say
the first one is Miami.
Miami.
Okay.
So it's, all my buddies that live up north, they're like, "Oh, you live in the Mecca of Republican states of Florida." It's like, yeah, it's a Mecca, but you're talking about an ocean of blue. You live in Broward. There's no representation for Republicans really there. It's a rare breed of a Broward Republican. But so I'm doing everything I can to kind of retain.
But it's also the biggest district in Broward.
It's one of the biggest districts. So it covers Fort Lauderdale International Airport, the ports, where the Carnival Cruise Lines, a lot of them pull from. I mean, you have huge economic hubs. Broward Health covers all throughout the district.
Why do you think Broward is so Democrat? Why do you think it's so blue? And there's only one area that right on the East Coast.
Yeah. So I think this reason kind of applies generally to you look at the demographics of the political makeup throughout the country. It clusters in metropolitan areas, right? Yeah. Broward is a very metropolitan. Fort Lauderdale,
very busy,
very busy,
very
area.
Condensed.
Look, we were just talking about it earlier. Also, Miami flipped from Republican to Democrat, unfortunately, right?
Right.
But you only see that there. If you look at states like New York or California, on election night, some people are a little confused. They're like, "Oh, New York's a blue state." It's all red around it. If you look, and you're like a small little pocket that's blue, but that pocket is 8 million people, right?
It's a majority.
Which make up 50%, right? But the rest of New York, like Albany County and, Westchester,
it's all red.
All red. So, why Democrats move to those areas, I can't even begin to understand the psychology of it.
Do you think that sometimes when you just go to a neighborhood, you're undecided, your neighbor might talk, and then you're like, oh, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Trump is an asshole, and I don't like him now.
Yeah.
It's influence. You think that's part of it? And it spreads?
So, look, I'll tell you, the biggest voter block in my district are NPAs, right? So
what's an NPA?
NPA is non-party affiliated.
Okay.
So the people that are neither Democrats nor Republicans, right? Okay. So, this is not like a super red county or district that I'm running on. It's like a plus R plus 3 or 4 seat. So it's like a mild red seat. So it's not something that just because I win the primary, I can just coast and I'm riding the gravy train to victory. You have to actually work for it, right? You have to convince people. And the thing you have to appeal to Democrats, you have to appeal to MPAs, but also not compromising your values as a conservative, right? Because the last thing that I think people despise most, I'll speak for a lot of Republicans, these milquetoast, mealy mouth, kind of go along to get along Republicans that are just like marshmallows. They they fold
either way.
Yeah, exactly.
You be pressure on them, they agree with you.
Exactly. So that's the last thing you need, because especially when you have one Republican seat, you want to make sure you have a strong, zealous conservative advocate that's not going to be,
it's not going to fold. It's going to stand for his values.
You would want that. You have one opportunity.
Yeah.
Again, and talk about Broward County, millions of people, right? And a huge portion of them are Republicans and now that's not to take away from the Democrats and the non-party affiliates that are also, God willing, they'll be my constituents as well. So you have to your point, you have to figure out a way to kind of bridge that divide, find common ground, because look, you had Trump won a lot of Democrats in Broward, right? There's a lot of areas that are represented by Democrats in Broward, but they went for Trump. So that took Democrat voters switching sides to go vote for a person, because he spoke to certain issues that are universal, they're not partisan, right?
Common sense.
Yeah, common sense. Keeping your money more in your pocket. Stopping all of the protests that are happening and the destruction of our monuments that was happening during
I remember that.
Yeah, the Summer of Love.
It's crazy.
2020. Yeah.
In up north, and that was crazy.
Country.
Yeah.
And it
didn't happen in Florida.
It didn't happen in Florida. Why?
Because we have a Republican president, DeSantis.
He is Republican governor, and DeSantis, and that's why, to a point that we were talking about, why is Florida so unique? Is because DeSantis really, in a lot of these votes, these elections, you're talking about deciding between 20,000 votes. We were talking earlier about Andrew Gillum.
The disaster.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about him in just a few seconds, so you can catch everybody up.
Yeah. But no, I can't underscore how important and how unique Florida is. So you want to make sure that the elected representatives that are being appointed to these positions, they understand and they have like a personal stake in making sure that Florida remains the free state that it is.
Yeah. Now let me ask you, you're a captain judge advocate as well.
Yeah.
Tell me about that.
So in addition to my legal practice, I do corporate transactional work as my own law firm. Yeah, corporate law firm. I represent a lot of businesses, startups. So in addition to that, I also serve as a captain in the Army Reserves and a judge advocate. So I do trial defense services. So basically what that means is when like a soldier or service member gets jammed up, they get accused of a crime, misconduct, the Army essentially gives them a public defender. That's
You're
me.
the public defender.
I'm the public defender. I'm the guy that has to go.
Why you choose that?
Why did I do that? Look, I'm first generation American. My parents immigrated here 45 years ago. And I have so much, this country, and particularly this community, gave my parents so much.
Respect for the country.
Yeah, and look, that debt of gratitude, that's what kind of propelled me to want to serve. And I think on it, and I know it sounds cheesy, but like I think if you're in a position that you can serve in whatever capacity, not necessarily military,
100%.
You should. And I think there was that mentality, 60, 70 years ago, 80 years ago. Yeah. I had a guy, to tell you a quick tangent. I was door knocking like a couple weeks ago, and there was a guy. I knocked on his door. He was 98 years. He's turning 100 in 2 months, right?
Wow.
So I was talking to this guy. This guy's with it, like sharp as can be. I was talking to him. I asked him a very point question. I was like, "What's the biggest change you've noticed in this country over the last 100 years?" And without fail, you know what he said to me? And it gave me goosebumps. He goes, "I'll tell you the difference. The biggest thing." He goes, "This guy was in World War II." He goes, "I lied about my age to get into the draft, right? I lied. I said I was 18 when I was 15. I had buddies who killed themselves because they were deemed medically unfit to be able to join the military, right? Because they had flat feet, they had asthma. They killed themselves out of shame.
Prideful to join.
No, they killed themselves out of shame because they couldn't join. Right? The shame, because all their buddies are being called. They happen to be born at this time in history, and when their country and the world needed them, and they felt inferior, right?
Yeah.
So he's saying this. He goes, today the opposite would happen. You'd have people lying about their age to avoid going into the military, and you have people killing themselves if they had to go to the military.
Wow.
So
what a difference, man.
When you and I've never heard anyone explain it to me like that. When he said that to me, it hit me like a punch in the face. Like, it's so true.
Why do you think that happened though?
Why do you think that happens?
Why the so loss of the patriotism?
Yeah. I mean, this is a much bigger question. I mean, we almost have to do like a whole week-long podcast. Yeah. But like, I think part of it is a very gradual, slow decline and of the idea of American exceptionalism and people recognizing how unique America is, not just in the world right now, but throughout history, right? When you think about someone like George Washington, right? There's never been in human history a guy that appointed or elected president and then after he's running a big country, voluntarily hands that power over to another person, right? Like usually the way it always worked up until then, you got into power, you stayed in power.
Yeah, that's right.
And then it went to your son or you went to your heir or something like that. The idea that someone would just voluntarily go peacefully and transfer that power, that's what makes America unique, right? And like and you think about all of the things that America's done over the last 100 years. The Korean War, I always talk to people about this, is one great example. We went to the Korean War solely to liberate half of the Korean Peninsula. The reason South Korea is the way it is because of American intervention, right? And you have the best juxtaposition of like North Korea. When you look at the satellite, it has 2 or 3 dots and then South Korea and Seoul is completely lit up. That is because you had tens of thousands of young men who went across an ocean to go and liberate those people. That's why you have 80 million people that are enjoying freedom. That's why America is unique. And I think like people not understanding how beautiful and precious this country is, I think over time, that's what kind of eroded, and where we are.
I agree with you, and there's a lot of a lot of foreigners that come in. They still don't understand. I think that we should do a better job at educating a little bit more patriotism in the schools. I think it starts there. I mean, taking out the Star Spangled Banner when that's the beginning of it.
But Andy, I mean, you're a son of immigrants, right?
That's right.
So your parents, I guarantee, I'm sure they're probably super 100%. Appreciative.
100%.
Yeah. So it's not necessarily immigrants. There are some immigrants 100% that have that, but unfortunately, that attitude, that antipathy, was kind of cultivated by people within America, right? Because they don't have a base of reference. Because once you understand, when you have something to compare against, then you understand like, oh wow, this is. Trust me, the rest of the world is kind of shitty comparison to what and then you really start to appreciate how unique America is, right?
And also what I've seen is that there's like a party, the Democrat Party. It's like, you think of the Democrat Party, anti-patriotism.
Yeah.
Like that's not necessarily true. There's a lot of Democrats that are super patriotic.
Yeah, for sure.
But the message that they've been spreading around is anti-patriotism,
right?
Anti-America. Like, why? And I think that's hurting also the reason why not so many people are joining the army and the military.
Well, now you've seen, thankfully, over the last 2 years since Trump's been in office, you've had the highest kind of recruitment rates. But look, I joined in 2022, so I've been serving for a little over 4.5 years. Okay. And when I joined, so Biden was commander-in-chief. I worked I did legal assistance here in Miami. If people are familiar, there's like a Southcom.
Yeah.
So we did legal assistance. So soldiers would come in, soldiers would come in with whatever, something with their lease. They're getting a divorce. About 40% of the cases I did were divorces. Some of the women in Miami, they know the law better than I do. They come to me, they educate me on the rules. But in all seriousness, so I
brought back memories.
Oh man, just right now, flashback. But one of the first cases I dealt with was a soldier who was in Special Forces who was getting kicked out of the Army because he refused to take the vaccine, the COVID vaccine. Yep. And you had a little over 11,000 service members that were separated from the military under the Biden administration for refusing to take a COVID shot, right?
11,000.
11,000, not including the number of people that decided not to re-enlist following the Afghanistan withdrawal, following that. It was just a lack of morale, right? So I had this guy who was an Army Ranger, was in for 16, 17 years, did a bunch of tours in Iraq, Afghanistan, and he's like, I got COVID twice. I've survived war. You're going to kick me out? I'm 3 years away from investing in my pension. His wife was in the Air Force, and the Army was the largest branch that is the largest branch in the military. So they took forever to kind of process these things out. Air Force, Navy, Coast Guard, if you didn't take it within 60, 90 days, you were out. So this woman, his wife, she didn't want to take it. She was afraid to take it because she was taking IVF fertility treatment. And she was afraid of the complications of that. We were able to buy him some time until Congress repealed it. But you think about that, why that was such a shot in the foot, right? And thank God Trump got elected, and now you're seeing recruitment rates going up, and you need that, right? We live in a country that relies on a voluntary military, right? We don't have the Vietnam. So I know that we kind of went from from District 100 to why America's beautiful, but like that's part of the reason why I'm running. Because I look, 100%. if you have an opportunity to serve, you have an opportunity to uphold and protect your constitutional rights and the fundamental principles that kind of make this country unique. That's the biggest calling that I could have, and it would be one of the greatest honors that I would have.
So what are the values? First of all, what are the values of like the Republican Party?
Yeah.
And if you can, tell us a little bit what you think the values of the Democrat Party are, so that we can teach, because we were talking off camera just a few seconds.
Yeah.
Maybe 5% of the population really understand politics.
Yeah.
And a lot of people vote for the person, I feel, instead of for the policies.
Yeah.
And a lot of people say, I hate Trump.
Yeah.
My answer to that is like, when are you going to have lunch with him?
Yeah.
Do you know him? Are you going to go have coffee? When was the last time you went to Trump's house and hung out and drank some whiskey or played some pool or went to the beach with Trump?
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't matter who the guy is.
Yeah.
What are the policies? What are they going to do for you? What are they going to do for the United States? What are they going to do for your community? That's my way of thinking. And a lot of people, unfortunately, still vote for the person. So I want people to understand who you are, but also I want people to understand what your policies are, what your values are. Yeah.
Just to piggyback off that, I had a Uber driver one time that during the 2024 election in D.C., and politics came up or whatever, and he said, he's like, I never voted for a Republican, but the way I think about president, he just needs to be an Uber driver. He needs to get me from A to B safely, right? I don't have to like him. I don't have to fall in love with him.
I'm never going to hang out with him.
I just want to make sure that when he picks me up, that I get there safely, right? And versus the other guy's going to be drunk and driving off the side of the cliff.
Like Andrew.
Yeah, exactly. Like Andrew. That was good. You brought that back together. You weaved that. I didn't even make that connection.
I'm not going to forget Andrew. We're going to talk about that. Tell us the values.
No, so I think
the Republican values.
Yeah, so look, I think the Republican values, a lot of it kind of pair with what we were talking about, a recognition of American exceptionalism, of understanding why America is something that needs to be preserved, and why it's so important to kind of carry on a civic, for people to understand the civic responsibility and to understand the history of America, and make sure that a lot of the constitutional rights and protections are upheld and are not infringed. And the idea of limited government, right, is just making sure that the government kind of gets out of the way and allows people to kind of live to their fullest potential. So I think that if you wanted to synthesize that to one core principle, I think that's the defining characteristic of the Republican Party. And you've seen that also with
less government, more independence.
And look, Trump is also
more opportunity.
Yeah, for sure. And the moment the government gets in the way, I think then the full measure, the full scope of human potential is fully reached. Whereas I think Democrats, and again, this is not, look, I'll say it point blank. When I was younger, I was a Democrat as well.
So was I.
Yeah. So I think, and Trump was too, Reagan was. A lot of people have that trajectory where some of the biggest conservative lions, Ronald Reagan was a Democrat until he was 60s. Trump was a Democrat 4 years before he became the Republican nominee for president. You know what it is? For me, it took a recognition, kind of opening my eyes and realizing, wait a second, why should I feel ashamed of living in this country? Or a big thought or kind of values or ethos that kind of exists within the Democratic Party is, if you're strong, if you're rich, if you're successful, that somehow you did something wrong, right? That and
people actually think that?
I think a lot of people think that. Okay. I think that a lot of people, they view, if you look at and especially in foreign policy, but America, this big, bad, imperial force.
Money is evil.
Yeah, exactly. No, but the idea is that if you have a strong party versus a weak party, that the strong party inevitably is the evil one, and the weak one is the one that's good and moral, right? But you see a lot of times that's not the case, right? You can look at an example like the war in Israel and Gaza right now. Yep. That doesn't necessarily negate. You have a very small contingent of Hamas. Yeah, they're weak in comparison to Israel, but I don't think
people still vote for the underdog, right?
Yeah, but I'm telling you, I think there's that thought that's permeating throughout a lot of people in the Democratic, and you hear it in their policies too, right? Yeah. That just the underdog, or the idea of the underdog, is must mean if you're successful, if you're wealthy, if you're doing well, it must mean that you did so at the expense of someone else, right? And and or the idea that if you are successful and let's say you didn't overcome or you didn't do it at the expense of someone else, you did it because of government, right? The government, like I don't know if you remember, if you remember back in like 2012, you didn't build that. Obama was very famous. It was a very famous line where he's like, he was trying to advocate for a tax increase. And he's like, I hear from a lot of businesses all the time that, I did this and I did this. You didn't build that. The government built that. And I think there's that there. It's like almost like the government wants to take responsibility for all the successes, but none of the failures. Right. So I do think there's a sense that a lot of the problems or the social ills facing society need to be handled or should be handled by the government as opposed to private enterprise. So I think that's a defining characteristic between 100%. The two parties.
100%. But for the Republican Party versus the Democrat Party, what are the values of the Democrat Party? Yeah,
so like I said, I think that's a big one, right? The idea that a lot of the social ills facing society should be delegated to the government to deal with. And
I see.
Yeah. So and look, if you think about it like this, 60, 70 years ago, when you had a problem in this country, the first thing that you did, you went to your church, your community. Then if you didn't go there, you went to the city or municipal level. Then if you weren't able to solve, you went to the state. Then if you're not, and then eventually you went to the federal government. Today it's reverse, right? Now you go to the federal government first, then you work your way down. Why? Because you have a huge family unit. People have a lack of faith and community and a sense of purpose. Because that's the first.
So you go to welfare and then figure out from there all the way down.
When a lot of the problems could be addressed. I mean, think about it. If people ask themselves right now, if I had an immediate problem, right, who's the first person I'm going to call? Is it going to be the Social Security services or the welfare office? No, most people say my mom, my dad, my brother, my friend, something,
immediate.
My rabbi, my priest, whoever, right? You're going to go to the people in your community nearest to you. And then you kind of work your way up depending on the scope of the problem. But now it's kind of like ass backwards, right? And so I think that Democrats have really kind of, for the last 50 years, have set things in motion to allow for that dynamic to be in place. And now just want to further solidify it as, no. The first turn that you go to is the federal government, right?
For help,
and you think why?
Opportunities.
Because the more reliant you are, the more you're willing to accept whatever else they're going to feed you. And like, I'm sure we'll get into it, but like COVID was the best kind of window into a lot of Democrats' minds and how they would really want to govern if they had the ability to do so, right? It was the best pretext.
Rules. The government says.
Yeah, all you needed was the right pretext to be able to implement that, and then you'll see.
They almost got away with it.
Exactly.
Almost got away
with your friend with Andrew.
Tell me about Andrew. I mean, this guy was almost governor of Florida.
Yeah.
He was 18,000 votes, which is nothing.
Nothing.
So, in Florida, where we have 23 million people in Florida.
Yeah.
18,000 votes. He was almost governor.
20,000 votes, something like that.
20,000. A few days later, a few months later, after he loses the race, thank God, he gets caught in a hotel with a couple of dudes naked with some crack, methamphetamine, something like that.
Just another Wednesday.
Another Wednesday for him. Yeah. Like, this is crazy. He just got arrested last week.
Yeah, but look, this is not. I promise you. Like, I have a general rule. It's never good to kind of like point down to someone who's struggling and whatever. But I bring up this story just to highlight the importance of elections
and understanding who you're voting for.
Understanding
really
who you're
understanding, dude. You're ex-military. You're an attorney. You're a family.
Current military. Current military.
Current military. That's the difference. The big difference. You're a family member. You're about to get married.
Yeah.
Like, you're a family man.
Yeah.
This is important.
Yeah.
Because the values are there.
Yeah, but that election in particular, people forget where we started with DeSantis, right? Like, now, I knock on doors. DeSantis is the guy that everyone like praises, and rightfully so, right? He's really kind of helped solidify Florida in the stature that it is.
100%.
So, but people forget where this happened, right? And this kind of underscores to the race I'm running in right now. But in 2018, DeSantis was running against the mayor of Tallahassee. It was Andrew Gillum. And he's running against him, and it was a very, very close race. And like I said, it was like 20,000, something around there, a rounding error, okay? And then to think, a year and a half after the election, what happens in this country? COVID.
Yeah.
COVID, and Florida was at a critical point, at a critical juncture in this country in terms of how it was going to govern with its COVID policy. It could either go in the direction of California and New York, or you needed a guy with the temerity to stand up when there was so much pressure. Like, not just from government officials. You talk about a community. People would shame you. How many fights did you see online with like people put on your fucking mask?
Yeah.
What are you doing? This and that. What are you crazy? You don't want. And to think that he was getting that on like the 100th degree, like take whatever you're talking. And because Florida was like, oh my God, DeSantis is killing old people. All these people. I can't believe he's doing this. He's keeping people in their nurse. Where in reality it was all projection. The people that they were amping up, like people like Cuomo, people like Newsom, you see him at the French Laundry right in the middle of COVID after he tells everyone to stay in. Nancy Pelosi at a day hairdresser. Hairdressers. By the way, those things, I tell people all the time, you want to know why it's important to vote? COVID was because again, I go back to it. When the government has the ability to execute or to
control you, when the government has the
and they could do it under the pretext of public health, because what are you going to do? I'm looking out for you. I'm making sure that you don't die, right? So don't question my discretion. Don't question my judgment. I'm looking out for people to save people's lives. But then it was a window into a lot of politicians' souls, so that people that were calling Trump a fascist, right, and a dictator, if he wanted to be a dictator. Think about it.
Shut the whole country down.
Shut the whole country down. And if anything, he was being called a fascist for wanting to open the country back up again. I've never met a guy, there's no fascist leader throughout history that wants you to have guns and stop the government from the entire economy from being closed. He was like, oh, you wanna have you're in the pocket of the NRA. You want to expand people's constitutional rights to right to bear arms. And at the same time, like it's just like it's ass backwards, right? And so DeSantis was able to prevail that, and because of that, people like my parents they're small business owners. They owned t-shirt shops on the boardwalk. My brother and I grew up working our entire lives, and up until when I started law school, my brother started medical school. We were working at my parents' souvenir shops. My dad, my dad's like my best friend. So I worked with my parents hand in hand from age 5. Up until when I started law school, and I still worked. I'm probably the most overly qualified T-shirt maker at Hollywood Beach. 100%. I'm a victim of child labor laws.
Shout out to your dad's store.
My dad, 100%. Hollywood style. You go to Hollywood Beach, you check them out, and you just drop my name, you'll get a free Trump shirt.
Free Trump shirt.
Yeah, exactly. No, but like at the time during COVID, like he never not worked. He's 71. He's never not worked, and he was going stir crazy for 2 months, right? And him and his friends, they're naturalized U.S. citizens for 45 years. They never voted in an election. They never thought politics really mattered. But until they started hearing like, oh, how are their friends in Venice Beach in California doing? How are their friends in New York and Cuomo doing? And so all of that, then you started realizing, what's the importance of making sure that you have the right leaders elected, and making sure, like going back to District 100, why it's so important that you're deliberate and you're selective about the people that you're voting in office.
In other words, you're telling me that you're not addicted to crack,
no
methamphetamine,
no,
no guys in a hotel room, right? You're good. You passed the test.
I guarantee. By the way, we should have a little bit of a higher barrier of entry. Other than that, that's the bare minimum. Okay.
Well, guys, we'll be right back after these commercials. We'll be right back.
Thanks.
Desde los hermosos atardeceres de Santorini, nos llega al corazón de Miami un nuevo concepto de comida latina en fusión egea, en Bargin, un restaurante de familia que te da una experiencia de 5 estrellas. En cada plato y en cada detalle crean un espacio sofisticado y acogedor, perfecto para saborear momentos inolvidables. Bargin. Estamos a la orden de tu gusto, en el 1010 de la 8 calle del Southwest. Haz tu reservación al 305-707-8904 o visítanos en bargin.com.
Vivimos rodeados de titulares, pero el periodismo riguroso empieza cuando vamos detrás de ellos, cuando explicamos el contexto y tratamos de entender los antecedentes, cuando comprendemos quién habla, por qué lo hace y qué consecuencias tiene lo que dice. Eso es La Noticia en Profundidad, un espacio donde nos dedicamos a abordar la noticia sin ruido y sin prisa. Los espero de lunes a viernes, de 3 a 4 de la tarde, en UnoNext Latino a través de unonext.com.
Propietarios del sur de la Florida. Manchas en las paredes o ese olorcito raro del aire. Eso no es decoración tropical. Es el moho creciendo más rápido que el tráfico en el Palmetto. Florida Restoration Master llega el mismo día con cámaras térmicas, plan de acción y contención total. Limpiamos, reparamos y dejamos tu casa como nueva. Mapa de humedad y estimado gratis el mismo día. Garantía de 30 días contra reaparición del moho. La temporada de tormentas se llena rápido. Llama ya al 877-778-5491. Repito, 877-778-5491. Florida Restoration Master. Respira tranquilo esta noche. La otra cara del mundial con el Coroncoro.
Hola, soy Luis Carlos Perea, el popular Coroncoro, mundialista colombiano, Italia 90, USA 94. Y esta es la otra cara del mundial. Les contaré anécdotas e historias que no se contaron de lo que pasó en un camerino. Nos acompañaron excompañeros y amigos con los que compartimos conversaciones del fútbol, pero desde un ángulo más cercano y humano. No te lo puedes perder. Los esperamos.
Por UnoNext Latino y UnoNext.com de lunes a viernes de 2 a 3 de la tarde. Invitados, entrevistas, comentarios con Luis Carlos Perea, estrella del fútbol colombiano.
Sufre de dolores musculares, calambres, hernias discales, dolor de espalda, cuello o articulaciones. Presentamos Flexador, el gel analgésico más increíble del planeta. Su fórmula avanzada actúa rápidamente aliviando el dolor y dándole la libertad de moverse sin molestias. Ideal para deportistas, personas activas o cualquier persona que quiera decirle adiós al dolor. No espere más. Visite radiomundomiami.com y ordene su Flexadol hoy mismo. Flexadol, alivio real cuando más lo necesita.
Welcome back, everybody. The podcast, The Standard. Here with Yoni Anijar, good friend, running for District 100 is an attorney, running for District 100 in Broward County for State House of Representative.
Yeah.
Well, if you haven't been here in the last half hour, we just dropped a few bombs on who Yoni is, what he stands for, what are the values, Republican values versus the Democrat values. That was very interesting. Thank you, Yoni, for sharing those things with us.
Thank you.
But, there's so much to talk about. Yeah. I mean, everything that's going on in Florida, you're running for House in Florida. What's going on with the property taxes? Is this rule that DeSantis is going to pass?
Yeah, so right now, so people understand, there was, DeSantis was trying to eliminate property taxes on homesteaded properties, okay?
Which I think is a great idea, by the way.
It's a great idea because if you think about it.
You got one property that you're exempt from. That's it.
But there's no asset class that you buy that you continue paying taxes on for the entirety of the ownership. You buy a car, you pay taxes on it once. Yeah. You buy anything, you pay tax on it once. For some reason, your home is the one thing that you continue paying taxes on until you die, right? And people should understand too, only 30% of all the property taxes paid in this country and in this state come from homesteaded properties. The other 70% of property taxes are secondary homes or investment properties. So you're talking about a very small, relatively
Shopping centers pay a lot of property tax.
yeah, but I'm talking about families, like single family
Yeah,
homes.
yeah,
They only make up 30% of the portion of property taxes paid in this country, in the state.
In the state.
So what DeSantis had implemented, and it's going to be on the ballot in November, as long as it passes by 60%, which I think it will, is he's going to increase the homestead exemption from $50,000 to $150,000, and then eventually it graduates to like $250,000. And the idea, over a few years, it's hopefully there's going to be enough appetite and enough kind of desire from the people and demanded from their leaders to completely eliminate property tax on homesteaded properties in the state of Florida. And so, God willing, it gets through. And I think it's a step in the right direction, because I think I'm in favor of a total elimination of property taxes for homesteaded. I think especially now when affordability is the number one issue
100%.
facing voters, and we were talking about it a second ago. I was door knocking all weekend this past weekend. I was there from 11 to 7 yesterday. And I had one guy that I spoke to that knocked on his door. And he's like, look, yeah, the property tax is great, but the biggest thing is property insurance. He goes, it's more expensive.
Another scam.
Yeah. Think about it. Most people, you only need property insurance because if you have a mortgage, right?
Yeah.
And prior to that, if you own a property outright, theoretically you don't need, if you're risk averse, you'll get property insurance. But the reason people have it is because now it's a requirement to have so, right? And there's a longer story about that. In the last 60 years, 70 years, the mortgage industry wasn't really a thing 70, 80 years ago. And then it kind of grew in tandem with it, right? Because, when you have another vertical to sell in addition to mortgages, insurance. But people's insurance, in the last 5 years, it's gone up over 200%. 200%.
And they blame it on the hurricanes.
They blame it on the hurricanes.
I mean, it has some variable, but it's not the
sure.
only variable.
But look, so going to that issue about what are some other ways to kind of address affordability. So property tax is definitely one. Property insurance, you had a tort reform bill that was passed 2 or 3 years ago that the aim of it was to address frivolous lawsuits that were driving up.
Yeah, DeSantis actually approved the first party attorney fees, which was a disaster.
Yeah,
in my opinion.
By the way, I agree with you. And I think a lot, and this is not a popular position in Tallahassee, but
a lot of people don't understand it still. I feel like a lot of politicians still don't understand what they voted for.
Yeah.
Or didn't vote for it. Some of them weren't even there.
Yeah. No, look, a lot of people voted for it. And by the way, I'm the first one to say if something's working or whatever, be objective. And I have the self-awareness to admit when I'm wrong. And, so I could be proven wrong about this. But right now, to your point, and I'm very impressed because most people don't, but you might be have enough friends or whatever that are in this space. But prior to the tort reform bill, if you had a claim on your property, let's say you had a $5,000 or $20,000 insurance claim on your roof, and the insurance company only wanted to pay $5,000,
or didn't want to pay at all.
Didn't want to pay at all, you would sue them, right? Yep. And as long as you prevailed on the merits, so meaning it's not frivolous because that's a talking point people say. If you prevailed on the merits and you won at least $1, right? The other side would have to pay your attorney fees. Now, why is that important? It's not just to enrich attorneys. What it was done is to create an inherent incentive for insurance companies
to behave,
right? But now you get rid of that. So if you have a $20,000 insurance claim on your roof and the insurance company wants to pay you $5,000 and you're like, no, I need more, kick rocks. Because now you have to go pay for an attorney out of pocket, and essentially they have you by the balls, right? Yeah. And they have the ultimate leverage to
They'll pay whatever they want, whatever they don't want to pay, they don't have to pay.
Look, and I get it. You have to make some compromises here, and I'm not decrying a lot of Republican leaders that voted for it. And by the way, there are a lot of bad actors in my industry, but the idea that the silver bullet to addressing insurance was frivolous lawsuits and lawyers. At the end of the day, lawyers are not this autonomous group. Right. They file on behalf of people that are affected by it.
Of the people.
So again, this is not me trying to glaze all attorneys, but they are kind of put into this category. Oh my God, these lawyers, these trial lawyers. I have a candidate in my race that he focuses on that. What he's really saying though, when he says all that, it's just not palatable to say. It's like, no, you greedy homeowner, why don't you just shut up and take whatever
take
they're
the
taking?
loss.
Take the loss, stop complaining, okay?
Yeah.
Just take it and be done with it. Look, a statistic that people should be aware of, prior to the tort reform bill, 40% of all insurance claims, of property insurance claims, were settled in Florida without any payment, right?
40%.
40%. So it means that when you filed a claim, it resulted in no money being paid. Today, it's 47%, 46, 47%. So that's, again, are there some kind of nuggets within the law that might prove to be fruitful? Probably. And look, you've seen, I think a lot of people have said, DeSantis, to his credit, you've seen some new carriers come into the state and some, the premiums have gone down a little bit. I talk to people and, it's a negligible amount, minimal amount so far.
$200 maybe.
Maybe. Again, I think DeSantis' heart was in the right place, but I think the other part of it is you have to address a huge problem in this state, which is fraud. You have $15 to $20 billion conservatively of fraud that's committed there, and all that fraud gets absorbed by homeowners in the form of higher premiums, right? And what I would want to do is I would want to give as many resources to local law enforcement to have dedicated units within their departments, a BSO, Miami Sheriff's Office, that investigates solely insurance fraud.
100%. I mean, there's probably a couple, maybe 100 bad actors in Florida.
But
investigate those bad actors.
Yeah, but by the way, those bad actors, you have a bunch of laws in the books, but they don't mean anything unless you actually enforce them, right? 100%. So law enforcement right now, if you think about it, just from I see it from the military. I have a lot of the guys that are guys in my units. They're FBI agents, they're lawyers, they're judges, federal prosecutors. A lot of the white collar crimes are prosecuted by either the AG's office from the state or the feds. But you don't see a lot of, when you call the police, you call Miami PD, you're not really seeing them cracking down on white collar crimes, right? They do, I'm sure, but not to the same extent as the feds, right? When you see healthcare fraud or whatever.
Yeah, there's a lot of fraud just goes untouched. Nobody says anything.
And
sweep it under the rug.
You have adjusters that come in and file bullshit claims on a crooked shingle and then saying that's a claim. Look, those people, I think they take away from the other great. I have people in my family that do public adjusting. Yeah. So I have people in my family that are lawyers as well, other than myself. But so like fraud is a big part of it. And what I think would happen is you need to, in order to reduce the prices of insurance, you need to encourage more carriers. You have to increase the supply, right? 100%. We'll drive down costs. So right now we don't have enough insurance carriers in the state.
To compete against each other, drive down the price.
Exactly. So how do we encourage more people, more carriers to come in? I think one part of it is you create a legislative environment that reassures these carriers that, hey, listen, when you come here and you underwrite policies and use these policies, when people are doing shitty things, right? When people are committing fraud, you could rest assured that we're going to hold them accountable. Because that makes a business owner, the insurance companies
100%.
or businesses.
They don't want to come in if...
They won't come, the same reason that a huge investor is not going to go and buy and open up a Walmart in Baltimore or in Minneapolis or in Minnesota because it's going to get completely ransacked, the next protest, or in Chicago. The same way that insurance companies, again, insurance companies make a lot of money. Yeah. This is not poor insurance companies playing a little violin for them. But I think generally, though, not just for insurance, for businesses generally, they should know that when they come to Florida and you have people that are committing and taking advantage of consumers, that they're going to be held to the fullest extent of the law. And unfortunately, a lot of that law enforcement happens
at the
going
feds,
back to,
like you said,
at the local level, right?
It should happen.
Should happen at the local level, right? The ball gets dropped. You have like laws that get passed from the state by Republicans, signed into law by DeSantis. Now they apply across the entire state, but you need local municipalities, mayors, commissioners. In Broward, a blue district, they just like turn the blind eye, right? So how do you encourage, or how do you require a lot of these local municipalities to enforce the laws that are on the books, right? And so that's a big part of it. And then the other thing that I think would help address property insurance is reinsurance. Again, a lot of people are kind of maybe not familiar with the concept of reinsurance, and it's kind of a boring conversation.
Give us 30 seconds.
Yeah, the 30 seconds. So basically, reinsurance is insurance for insurance companies. Yep. So when an insurance company wants to come in and open up shop, they need, let's say, $40, $50 million, right? but they only have 25. So they go to a reinsurance company in Bermuda or off the coast, and they say, hey, listen, spot me the other 30 so I can issue policies in Florida. It's like, okay, no problem. But that reinsurance company is also reinsuring policies in Texas, policies in California. So when the trifecta happens, when you have a wildfire in California, a flooding in Texas, and a hurricane in Florida all at the same time, guess what happens? That same money that's on the books for each of those insurance companies gets spread thin, and then you have a lot of these insurance companies that go bust, and no one gets paid out. So there are ways, there are mechanisms in place that I think could help act as a backstop for insurance companies. So those insurance carriers, there's a 40% markup when they get insurance, and that gets passed on to consumers. It's a huge amount. Yeah. So there's ways that that's an area that I'd want to explore, and I think will help reduce premiums.
I agree with you, man. I think you're on the right track to help this state be more affordable.
I'm doing what I can, man.
No, you're doing the right thing. And then, I mean, just to throw a little bit more salt in the steak right here, you know, what DeSantis did with the Florida PIP repeal as well, where he took out an entire industry overnight. I mean, are you familiar with the PIP repeal as well?
I am, but I know we were talking about it before. You're more because you do physical therapy.
No. So basically, he did the same thing. He went into Florida PIP and he says, listen, attorneys, when the insurance doesn't pay the medical provider, say, you know, we have 50 locations for physical therapy now. Yeah. The insurance company X doesn't want to pay me. I have no recourse. Right. I can't go to an attorney. I could, but I have to pay out of pocket. Right. First, nobody's going to take this case for free, so I would have to pay my attorney fees ahead of time. Right. Versus if they're found at fault for not paying this either by error or on purpose, the adjuster did it. So you know what? I think this guy did fraud. I don't want to pay. Right. I don't want to pay your clinic. Now, before I would go to an attorney, I'll say, look, you know, they denied me. They think they just didn't pay me. Right. Whatever the reason, they didn't pay me. The attorney would go file suit.
On behalf of the providers.
On behalf of myself, of the provider. And then when the insurance was found that your guys are wrong, we went to court, you know, the insurance has to pay by order of a judge, then they would have to pay attorney fees. Right. There was a lot of abuse as well. Yeah. So what did DeSantis do? No more attorney fees for nobody. Wiped out hundreds of, probably thousands of attorneys. Complete law firms were based on this.
Yeah. No, I have some friends. Look, and I get it. I go back to it before. I think DeSantis's, I think I can understand where his mind was at, but I do think it was a little bit of a ham-handed approach. Yeah. But at the same time, you had to kind of make some compromises. And DeSantis, to his credit, has done a tremendous job at kind of governing the state.
100%.
But, and I think part of it was that, you know, the tort reform bill was intended to be able to address the higher premiums, the affordability issues. My whole argument is not necessarily repealing it or whatever. Look, we'll see how it plays out. But in tandem with the laws that are currently in place, why don't we also address these other areas that will inevitably reduce the cost of premiums? There's one thing that people don't know for property insurance, right? We have something called in Florida CAT fund. So CAT fund is a big pocket of money that the state, essentially it's like a rainy day fund. And it's meant for like hurricanes like Hurricane Andrew, if you remember in like the early 90s. Yeah. So like when
we have a surplus right now.
We have a surplus. So what we could do is lower the threshold for when those claims get paid out. And then that could act as a backstop for a lot of insurance companies. So rather than relying on reinsurance from Bermuda,
we become the reinsurance.
Exactly. So that's one thing I want to explore. And look, we'll see how much that's going to result in a reduction in premiums. And I don't think that's a partisan issue. I think there's going to have like even some Democrats or and independents, they can understand that.
100%. Like, and if Florida becomes a reinsurance company, just like, you know, now the government's going to own part of OpenAI. Or what was it? Anthropic. Yeah. So, you know, this is a good idea, you know.
But look, right now we have Citizens insurance, and so Florida. So it's not like it's without precedent. And I'm not saying that Florida should be the only kind of solution, but I think Florida should, you know, be able to leverage its position as one of the largest insurance markets in the country, and be able to exercise that leverage with insurance companies and be like, listen, guys, what do you guys need? Yeah. But at the same time, you don't come here and issue policies and then leave homeowners stranded when they look. So many, they're homeowners and they've had their home for 30 years, never made a claim once, but their insurance premiums go up continually. And it's like, what the hell? Like, I'm
Pipe breaks and then you can make a claim.
Yeah.
The hell?
By the way, it's not even worth it, because if they do make a claim, then their premium is definitely going to go up the next day. So it's kind of a catch-22. So look, there needs to be a kind of broad-based reform. I think those two areas are first two that I would want to address. And then the last thing is, generally going back to the property tax issue, is this state spends a bunch of money on bullshit. Okay.
Yeah.
And you'll see it on the county level. There are some counties that run super lean, but what I want to do is add legislative teeth to the DOGE efforts, and you do audits on the counties and municipalities and require them to implement KPIs in place to root out that waste, fraud, and abuse. And then whatever those savings are get passed on to constituents or to voters by, through property tax relief or otherwise. Yep. Your job as your representative is to make sure that you pay as little as you can in taxes, and then whatever you do pay in taxes, your representative's job is to go to Tallahassee and bring that money back to the county and invest it in the community, better schools, better parks, better roads, whatever the case is.
Better salaries for teachers.
Yeah, exactly.
So besides the affordability, what else do you think, your district needs that you'd like to make a change as soon as you're in office?
So look, I think affordability is the biggest
one,
thing.
yeah.
Number one. And I think you could say that this next thing that I'm about to say is kind of tied to it, but home ownership. Right. And you have so many people.
That's important.
Yeah. And look, it's part of the American dream. Like, part of the reason why I'm running is, look, my parents came here and I saw them build their entire businesses from scratch. Right. And I see so many families, not only in my district, but throughout the state, that dream is slipping from them. Right. And what can you actually do? Look, my parents moved here 45 years ago. They were able to, no formal education, owning t-shirt shops, being able to support my brother and I, go through school, buy a home, pay it outright, not have a mortgage. Yeah. That's like, it's almost impossible today. And
it was hard for you as an attorney, as an entrepreneur. It's hard for you.
I have enough self-awareness to know that my situation is not the norm, right? I remember very humble times. Literally, we had an apartment in the back of our t-shirt shop, that I would work in 12, 14-hour days. So I know what
humble
it's like.
Beginnings.
Humble beginnings. I was never lacking anything. Thank God, my parents always provided for my brother and I. But I know the value of $1. Trust me, I work my ass off, and I work incredibly hard, and I respect money in that sense. Yeah. And for me, my view is, I think the taxpayer is a better steward of their money than the government is. 100%. So I want to do everything I can to carry that ethos forward, right? To empower, to spare taxpayers of their hardworking dollars that anyways are going to go to a blunder on the city or local level. But home ownership 30 years ago, and you had the median home price was about 1.5 times the median salary, right? Okay. Today, it's 8 times the median salary. So just think about that. Like, you have to make 8 times whatever the median salary in this country in order to be able to buy a home, right? Wow. And before it was 1.5 to 2 times. So, and that's over the course of 30 years. Yeah. So, and then the other statistic is, 30 years ago, the number, I think it was 65 or 70% of 30-year-old men were married, owned a home, and had children. Today, it's less than 35%, right? So when you continue that, when you extrapolate that over the next 30, 40, 50 years, what does that country look like, right? If you have a whole generation of renters, right, that aren't able to get into that market, that's part of that was the promise that was made for the last 80 years after World War II. For essentially work, you have one job, you can even a single family, single home income, right, where the wife can stay at home or whoever stay at home, and that one spouse would be able to be the breadwinner for the entire family. That's unheard of today, right? And so when you have continually over the next, 60, 70 years, people that are not able to they're in a worse spot than their parents were 40 years before them. And then it's the easiest time to make money, right?
It is.
With AI, with technology, it's never been easier, but still people can't get ahead, right? So what can we do to incentivize or create an environment that encourages or supports for young families to kind of move to Florida or
buy a home and live the American dream?
Yeah, be able to establish roots, have the same sort of opportunity that people like my parents had.
That's right.
And that's part of the reason that's kind of driving me. And I have a personal stake, like I mentioned before. Like I have someone who's born and raised in this community, I have every reason to make sure that the same opportunity that was afforded to my parents is afforded to my future children, God willing.
Yeah. Wow, man, that's an incredible thing. You're right. Not enough people are buying homes at this time. That is, but there's also it's very hard to qualify to buy a home right now. Well, that's another issue. I mean, even if you had the money, you have to go through loops and bounds to buy a home, which is fine because it avoids the whole 2008 catastrophe that happened.
But the bigger thing is the supply, right? So you have, I mean, just like going back to insurance carriers, it's a limited supply of homes, right? So one is you have a lot of private equity companies that are buying up homes.
That's what I say, BlackRock,
they're buying hundreds of thousands of homes here in Florida, and they're renting them out, and that money doesn't get absorbed by the county or the state. It goes out of the state, so we have no benefit of that, right? So how do we could tax people and make up that revenue from taxing people that are speculated in Florida, and then separately you have, how do we incentivize people to sell their properties, right? You have a lot of people that are trapped. After COVID, they had 2% mortgages, right? And they have no real incentive to actually sell their property. So one of the things Trump administration was talking about is mortgage portability. It's having that mortgage kind of move over to your new property so you can lock in that rate. You don't 100%, lose that.
That would be a great idea.
Yeah. So look, if that's on a federal level, but there's definitely ways that I can, as a state partner, you could work with the administration to kind of carry that forward. And I think all of those conditions would kind of make the home market a little bit more affordable and lower the barrier of entry for people to enter into.
Well, Yoni, man, thank you for giving us so much input into your mindset and into your personality and to who you really are. Because, we always say, look, there's two things in politics: who the person is and what they stand for, what their policies are, what they want to do in this life. And I appreciate you giving me this time to understand, number one, who you are, who you really are. We've talked off camera for a while. I trust you. I believe in you. I think that you're going to be an amazing asset to our community here in Fort Lauderdale. Thank you for being here. Where can people find more information for you?
Go to YoniAnijar.com. So YoniAnijar.com. Follow me on Yoni Anijar at Facebook or Anijar_Florida House on Instagram. And feel free to reach out to me at info@YoniAnijar.com.
Yoni, thank you again.
Thank you so much, man. I appreciate the opportunity.
All right.
It's cool, man.